Good morning, everybody. Haley Gibson here. Today, I just want to talk to you a little bit about a test that I've talked about in several of my other videos. You've probably heard Dr. Jockers talking about it as well. It's called the organic acid test. This is a great test to get clients started and start digging to the root cause of their health problems. Before we dive into this, I just want to tell you a little bit about my background. I'm not going to tell too much of my story today. But essentially, I went through nursing school and I got a job in the hospital and I started working there and I loved all my patients. I had a great time taking care of people from all sorts of backgrounds. Had a lot of cardiac procedures, lung procedures, cancer. I've seen people with their esophagus taken out whenever they have cancer in their esophagus, heart attacks, strokes, a little bit of everything, digestive issues. And one thing I found at the hospital that kept me from truly loving my job was that I felt like we weren't getting to the root cause of problems. We were slapping Band-Aids on symptoms. Patients would complain about everything under the sun, and there would be nothing we could do for them at the hospital. And that's not the hospital's place. The hospital is there to say, okay, intervention, we saved your life. Now you need to go home and fix whatever it is that you're doing that got you here to begin with. Well, I found myself just wanting to go home with my patients and tell them, well, let's clean out your pantry. Let's get you all these healthy foods. Let's go to the gym together. And I just wanted to help instill different lifestyle patterns in my patients. And I would talk about it with them as best as I could. The hospital's kind of busy. You don't get a lot of time to talk to your patients. But when I did talk to them, I found that, my patients really wanted to know this stuff. They were interested. They just didn't know about it. So I also have followed Dr. Jockers since the year 2010. And I wanted to learn from him personally because I knew he was helping people on a whole other level that just the medical community is not doing. So I wanted to dig deeper into other people's health problems as well as my own. I did struggle with bulimia for 5 years, and that resulted in a whole array of health problems for me. I have other videos going into that, but essentially God set me free from that. He laid it on my heart to tell the truth and get other people involved. So I had to open up emotionally and mentally. And once I did that, I was able to overcome my problems. The truth literally set me free is what I like to say. And I'm just so thankful that I've come across that bridge. And I would love to help anyone out there who's struggling, not just with an eating disorder, but with any kind of chronic health condition. I know that it's mentally taxing and emotionally exhausting. So from that perspective, that's why I do what I do. I'm very passionate about helping people. And one of the things I do with Dr. Jockers at Exodus Health Center and online at drjockers.com, I do set up consultations with clients, and we work one-on-one together to dig to the root cause of your problem. I set up a customized plan for you, and I'm there to be your person who you bounce your ideas off of, who you take advice from, who you're able to vent to and trust. That is, my passion in life. So that's a little bit about me in a nutshell. So let's get to it. The organic acid test. This is a picture of what it looks like. So just a brief overview of what the organic acid test is. It is a simple urine test. The one we offer at drjockers.com, you can actually do that in your home and send off the sample to the lab, and the lab will then collect the data and send that off to us, and then we will actually go through your values and we'll explain what this means, what we need to do about it, what this is telling us. We don't diagnose with this test, but we do look at pointers to tell us a little bit more about what's going on underneath. It tells us a lot about cell function and the gut microbiome. Some of the things we can tell from this test include yeast overgrowth, bacterial overgrowth, fungal exposure, in forms of mold, as well as even in forms of food, such as peanuts or coffee. Even some of our fruits and vegetables do have forms of mold on them, so just something to be aware of. Other things that we look at include, we actually do look at C. difficile, which is something in the hospital that's very common, so I found that pretty interesting when I first started looking through this test. Wow, we can tell based off your urine what kind of metabolites are showing up if you have indicators for C. difficile, which is a very dangerous bacterial species. We can also tell issues if you're having trouble with your mitochondria, which are the powerhouse of the cell. We'll talk more about that. We can tell how you are metabolizing fatty acids, amino acids. We can even tell a couple of genetic disorders. So essentially, organic acid testing pairs well with other types of integrative lab testing. It helps us confirm or deny the possibility of various clinical concerns, nutrient deficiencies, and physiological issues. So we also look at B vitamins, vitamin C, neurotransmitters, adrenal fatigue. There's all sorts of things we can tell from this test. So it's really a great starter test. And it's also great to get and then retest after you've implemented a protocol just to see how far you've come. So let's get to it. So this is a million different things. So the problem with symptoms can really be a cause of so many different things, especially once metabolic chaos starts happening. So fatigue, that can be a cause of so many things. Poor sleep, poor mitochondrial dysfunction, yeast overgrowth, you name it. It could be a cause of it. So that is just one thing that we can kind of get a better look into with an organic acid test. Just kind of look into the gut microbiome and see what's some type of joint pain or swelling. Helpful to know. This is just a little bit more about the organic acid test. So we do look at methylation. We also look at lipoic acid and CoQ10 markers, which is great to know if you have sufficient amounts of those. Like I said, the adrenal system, we're looking at that. So the central nervous system, we're able to look at dopamine, the catecholamines, norepinephrine, and epinephrine, as well as serotonin levels. Lots of fun things. So the first thing on the test that shows up is related to yeast overgrowth. So this is just a little slide to show what all can cause yeast overgrowth. As you can see, it's a number of things, especially the way that we are living here in America. You know, our exposure to chemicals has gone up. Our diet is typically consisting of processed foods and excessive amounts of sugar. Smoking cigarettes also puts us at risk because it actually lowers, you know, the oxygen levels and the sufficiency of our cells to function. So that can put you at risk. Mercury fillings is a big one that we're now discovering. Mercury toxicity is resulting in disrupted cell receptor function, which that can affect all the neurotransmitters in our body, hormones in our body, leaving us at risk to actually have insulin resistance, bacterial overgrowth, yeast overgrowth, all these things. It can actually be sexually transmitted. Yeast is common in parts of the gastrointestinal system. It's typically in the bottom of the colon, or at the top there is some in the throat. But what happens is it will begin to overgrow whenever the body is not regulated properly. And then it actually releases so many endotoxins that can affect the body. And one thing that always kind of alerts me is when someone says they just feel hungover every day, I'm thinking, okay, you might have yeast overgrowth if you feel hungover every day. Reason being, it actually releases acetaldehyde into the body, which is the same thing responsible for that hungover feeling that you get after you have drank too much alcohol. The dehydration and the acetaldehyde just being present in excessive quantities can make you feel hungover. Chronic stress, lack of sleep, that's typically the most common. It affects your immune system, and that's when pathogens, when they're opportunistic, they will flourish whenever you're just overstressed and overworked. So the ones that we look at for that, arabinose is typically the most common one that I see. If I can go back. So if you look here, this yeast and fungal markers, you go down, you see arabinose. In this sample page, it's actually high in that one. Other things that we look at, the citramalic acid, that does tell us a form of yeast is present. The 5-hydroxy-2-feroic acid, that one is actually related to coffee. There's 3-oxyglutaric acid, that one's related to yeast as well. And then furan 2,5-dicarboxylic acid and furan carbonoglycine, those are actually related to aspergillus as well as yeast. Tartaric acid, yeast, and food additives, I think it's pretty amazing that we can actually see a metabolite that shows us we have too many food additives in our diet. Carboxycitric, that's usually related to yeast and fungal. Tricarbolic acid, that's usually related to some type of mycotoxin, which is like the peanuts and corn I was telling you about. So the next thing we can talk about, that's yeast. We can tell yeast overgrowth, huge to know, and there's different ways that you can take care of that. Today I'm more so going to go through how we find it. Other days are dedicated to what we do about it. So the next thing that we will see, bacterial markers down here. So this will tell us a little bit about SIBO. It doesn't necessarily tell us the different kinds. The ones that tell the different kinds are the Clostridia markers down there at the bottom. That kind of tells us the kind. But other than that, it's pretty much just telling us if we have an overgrowth or not. So it's not specific. You'll need a stool test to get specific kinds. But it's still very beneficial to know if you have bacterial overgrowth. This is a picture of mold. One thing I want to mention about mold, sorry, I'm backtracking a little bit. So mold does not have to be this obvious. This is a very obvious, okay, there was a fire in the house, some firemen came and put out the fire, something like that. That can actually result in mold and bacterial growth in your home, and you're breathing it in, so you won't even know. A lot of times the smell is so subtle that people don't even know. So if you're trying to eat healthy and you're just not getting better, looking into some kind of mold issue is highly recommended because it can cause a chronic inflammatory response that just keeps you from healing your body. So I do advise you to get mold checked out. So this one is the one I was going for, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So I really like this slide. It kind of puts it all out there. Some symptoms you may be feeling if you're struggling with small intestinal bacterial overgrowth are things like food allergies, sensitivities, joint aches, muscle pains, mood swing, brain fog, weight loss or weight gain, deficiency diseases, gas, bloating, constipation, diarrhea, fatigue, and immune system dysfunction. All of these things, especially gas, bloating, constipation, diarrhea. We kind of talk about some of the causes, but some other causes that could happen, you could have some kind of obstruction in the bowel, sluggish peristalsis. So if you think of the food that you eat, when it goes through your digestive tract, if it's sluggish, if you're struggling with constipation, that means that your food is going to be sitting there and actually ferment and rot in your intestines. It's not meant to sit there. We are meant to push it out. So if it's sitting there and it's getting re-fermented over and over and over again, we're just extracting more and more waste into our body. So we're soaking in more waste. We're having bacteria overgrowth. And then, bad things happen. Neuropathy, that can definitely result in it. The sphincter is an interesting way to think about it. So there's a sphincter in between the large intestine and the small intestine. And what happens is sometimes the sphincter, depending on the person, it can get stuck closed or open. So if it gets open, okay, we need to do a little anatomy first. So the small intestine is connected to your stomach, and then it goes down and eventually connects into the large intestine. The large intestine joins into the rectum, and that is where we defecate. So in between the large intestine and the small intestine, there is a sphincter. It's located down on the lower right quadrant of your abdomen, but there is a sphincter, and sometimes it'll get stuck open or closed. So when it's stuck open, think of food rushing through, diarrhea. There's nothing there to make it stop. So we have indigestion of our food. We don't absorb our nutrients. And there's also food particles getting to the large intestine before it is properly digested. So when that happens, we can actually have bacteria start to ferment on the foods, and they proliferate like crazy. Those of you who have taken chemistry or anatomy of any kind, and you get to grow things on plates, microbiology, and you get to grow things, you know that bacteria grows like crazy. You stick the little petri dish out, and you don't even put anything on it. You just let the air circulate around. That petri dish, what you grow organisms in, it contains like food sources for bacteria to grow. You don't have to inoculate it with anything. If you just let the air circulate, bacteria will land on it and they will proliferate. They can float in the air just fine. So if you think about how easy it is for them to proliferate and grow, think about the bacteria sneaking up from the large intestines, and they will grow into the small intestine when that sphincter is left open. This can result in small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, otherwise known as SIBO. It can also happen if the sphincter gets closed and the food, like I said, constipation, the food gets stuck. So then you can have excessive fermentation, and the bacteria can then begin to proliferate where it's not supposed to. So that's a little bit about SIBO. And down in the lower right corner, you can see some ways that we actually help people with SIBO. We're not going to go into a lot of that, but there's other videos that have. We're just talking about the organic acid test today. So just looking at those, I think I've explained those. Basically, we look at bacterial overgrowth. All right. So next on the list is the low oxalate diet. So there are two markers called glyceric and glycolic, and we can actually tell if you have a genetic disorder for metabolizing what are called oxalates. So oxalates are in lots of foods, especially spinach, greens, nuts, soy, beets. All of these foods contain high amounts of oxalates, and spinach and greens, those are healthy foods. So why am I struggling with oxalates when I'm eating healthy? Well, the problem is that some people don't metabolize it appropriately, but another issue is actually yeast overgrowth. If you have yeast overgrowth, that can actually cause you to not metabolize oxalates appropriately, which can result in excessive oxalates. So oxalates are known to cause gallstones, kidney stones, and joint pain because they actually crystallize in the body. What happens is it will bind with calcium. Some symptoms you may experience include pain, maybe burning when you go to the bathroom, frequent urination, maybe you have a family history of kidney stones, things like that. So what we do whenever we see this is we avoid the list. We give you a diet list that tells you what you can eat and what to kind of stick away from. If it's genetic, you probably want to stick to this list, long term, and just enjoy oxalate foods here and there. And there's things that you can take with oxalate foods to keep you from binding onto them. We also avoid calcium and high doses of vitamin C. Reason being the calcium and vitamin C, they can actually crystallize with the oxalates. So that's a little bit about oxalic acid. Okay. So the next thing that we look at is the mitochondria. So the mitochondria are the powerhouse of the cells. They are the ones that take energy in or they take fuel in, and they produce energy. So there are a lot of factors that come into play whenever we have our mitochondria functioning, and this is something so helpful to look at because we can tell all sorts of deficiencies from the organic acid test. For instance, coenzyme 10, Q10. This acts as an electron carrier between complexes in the mitochondria. A deficiency causes a decline in activities of these complexes, which reduces the expression of mitochondrial proteins involved in oxidative phosphorylation, decreased mitochondrial membrane potential, increased production of reactive oxygen species. And basically what that means is if you don't have good levels of coenzyme Q10, your mitochondria are not going to produce energy efficiently. We can also look at things like N-acetylcysteine, which is an antioxidant that is huge for reducing free radicals. Every time we produce energy, we produce free radicals. That is just part of the process. Our diet should include enough antioxidants for us to reduce the free radicals produced when we produce energy. However, most of the time it doesn't. So it's great to know about N-acetylcysteine. We can tell how you process omega-3 fatty acids. We can tell if you are on a ketogenic diet just by looking at this. Alpha-lipoic acid, this significantly improves mitochondrial content and size in the liver during animal studies. Alpha-lipoic acid is huge for mitochondrial function and blood sugar regulation. Quercetin restores the mitochondrial membrane potential and enhances ATP levels. What that means is it enhances energy levels. Carnitine is huge. Carnitine is definitely a big one that we can see. So this improves the mitochondrial content and size. Acetyl L-carnitine given to old rats promotes the development of new mitochondria in the liver, which can contribute to the reduction of cellular oxidative stress. It protects against mitochondrial dysfunction in models of stroke ischemia and neurodegenerative disorders. So carnitine is really huge for utilizing fatty acids, and especially when we're in depleted moments of oxygen. So that is a couple things that we can tell from the organic acid test. So markers that would look at CoQ10 and vitamin B2 include succinate. Fumarate looks at CoQ10. Malate looks at CoQ10 and vitamin B3, not 3. 2-oxyglutaric, this can actually look into B vitamin deficiencies and how we're detoxing ammonia, which is a byproduct of protein metabolism. Yeah. So we also look at lactate and pyruvate. Both of these are utilized in the production of energy cycle. So if these are high, we can see a CoQ10 deficiency. We can also see that Krebs cycle metabolite markers. We do have isonotate, citrate, isocitrate. Essentially, that's what we're looking at. Alpha-lipoic acid, N-acetylcysteine, glutathione, lipoic acid, CoQ10, all these things. That's what we're looking at. Okay, so the next one that we're going to talk about is called homovanillic acid. And the 3 little letters that kind of break it, in the acronym is HVA. So if this is high, this tells us we have an increased breakdown of dopamine. So we ask, why would this be high? Why would dopamine be high? Typically it's high because we have some kind of stressor going on. It could be infection, inflammation, microbial imbalance. It could be some type of heavy metal exposure. It could be your life. It could be, your boyfriend stressing you out, something like that. So when dopamine is elevated, our sense of awareness is heightened. We pay attention to things. We're really more productive. So people may feel good when they have an excess amount of dopamine. But, this doesn't last long. For those of you who have dealt with adrenal fatigue, you know, it doesn't last long. You feel good for a while and you're like, you know, I'm stressed, but I'm getting it all done. Well, our bodies will crash eventually. And that is when dopamine drops and cortisol drops. So dopamine actually needs to be converted over into norepinephrine and epinephrine. So we can see those by something called vanilla mandelic acid. So if this is high, this shows us that we have an increased breakdown of norepinephrine or dopamine. If it's low, we have a decreased breakdown of these things. So some things that we do, you know, we ask why, what's going on stress-wise in the body or outside the body. We need to address, you know, not just the microbiome or heavy metals or things like that, but we need to address how are you coping with stress? Are you overworking? Are you, you know, super mom, super dad, and then also working full time and then volunteering on the weekends? Like, how much are you putting on your plate, and is it realistic? Those are some of the types of things that we look at. So if we have high dopamine and low catecholamines, norepinephrine and epinephrine, we're actually thinking of conversion issues, and this could also be related to adrenal fatigue as well. In order to convert appropriately, we have to have certain vitamins and minerals present. So vitamin C, magnesium, the B vitamins, all these are really important for you to actually convert dopamine into the catecholamines. The next one that we look at is serotonin. It's known as 5-HIAA on the organic acid test. So when it's low, some things you may experience, serotonin plays a big role in. Whenever it's low, you may have issues with your mood. You may get really moody. You may have disrupted sleep, or your appetite may be just really off. So serotonin is something that we find low a lot. And the thing about these three neurotransmitters, I just want to put into perspective how easy it is for them to be thrown out of whack. So vitamin B6 is absolutely necessary for us to convert our nutrients. Our amino acids make these up. So we absolutely need vitamin B6 to convert our amino acids into these active neurotransmitters that you see here. So vitamin B6 or that it uses up all of our B6 and now we're deficient. So if we're deficient in B6, then we can't produce good levels of dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine. And if you're not producing good levels of these, you're not going to feel very good. So that is one thing that I like to use to just put it in perspective how important a vitamin deficiency can truly be. It can throw off your neurotransmitters. Alrighty. So that's a little bit about that. So other things that the organic acid test really looks at is blood sugar control and are you keto adapted? Like I said, we can tell if you're eating a ketogenic diet just based off of the metabolites that would be high. So someone who's in ketosis, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, Dr. Jockers does a great job of spreading the word about ketosis. So if you're listening to this, I'm assuming you've probably heard him talk about it. But essentially what it means is that our bodies function off of glucose or fatty acids for fuel to produce energy. Whenever we are functioning off glucose and we are solely reliant on that for our energy levels, what can happen is we actually have big swings in blood sugar, which means we have big swings in insulin. If we have elevated levels of insulin, we're going to create a lot of inflammation in our bodies. So ketosis is when we completely, cut out our carbs and we focus on a high quality, good fat diet, moderate amounts of protein, and your carbs will come from non-starchy vegetables, maybe a few berries. And you actually switch your body over from burning glucose for energy to burning fat for energy. Pretty cool. We have amazing results when people do ketosis. It's not for everybody. I do advise you to work with somebody, but ketosis is a really great way to lose weight, have better mental clarity, clear the digestive system up, clear out infections, fight cancer. It's a really great thing. But I do advise you, it doesn't mean go eat all the cheese and bacon. There's a better way to do it. And other videos explain that. I don't really have time to explain it this morning, unfortunately. But yeah, it's a little bit about it. We can also tell through the mitochondrial markers that we talked about how you're utilizing sugar, how you're utilizing glucose. So another thing that we look at are vitamin B markers. We can actually look at just about all of them. So this kind of tells you a little bit about each vitamin. I don't want to talk about all of them. Let's just look at vitamin B12. Vitamin B12 is huge, and we can actually tell if you have a deficiency in vitamin B12 by looking at this. So B12 is huge for methylation. And what that means is that methylation is involved in millions of processes in our cells every day. It's a pretty simple process, but if it doesn't happen, we're going to see issues with our neurological system, cardiovascular, digestive, you name it, it's all of them. And it does affect homocysteine levels, and homocysteine has been linked to hurting our vessels. What will happen is homocysteine will nick the side of our vessels, and then our cells will elicit a reaction to go try to repair the vessel by sending over white blood cells and little helper cells and cholesterol to patch up the nick in the vessel, and then this results in plaque formation. Plaque formation can then lead to things like heart attack and stroke. So not a good thing. B12 is very important. Deficiency symptoms that you may see are chest pain, shortness of breath, fatigue, dementia, dizziness, coldness, slow reflexes, pale or yellowing of the skin, or a sore mouth and tongue. So B12 is very important. Definitely want to include that in our diets. The best sources are going to be grass-fed beef and liver also. Folate activates a sexual response, normalizes gestation during pregnancy, and it promotes heart health. Symptoms that you are not getting enough folate could be anemia or birth defects. We need good levels of folate to produce healthy red blood cells. So every B vitamin plays a large role in multiple areas of the body. So it's very cool that we can see what are we deficient in, where do we need to make up for our deficiencies. It just spells it out for you. So there's all the different B vitamins on the test, which is awesome. We can also look at glutathione. Glutathione is the major antioxidant in the body. Like I was saying, we produce free radicals even when we're just producing energy. We produce free radicals all day long. But when we have an excess of free radicals and we're not matching that with glutathione production and N-acetylcysteine and all the other antioxidants in our body, that is when oxidative stress occurs, and that's when inflammation occurs, cellular aging, disease, death, all those things start to occur. So if we have a glutathione deficiency, it's important that we help boost that back up. Great ways to boost it back up are, green tea, boosting it with N-acetylcysteine, resveratrol, turmeric, avocados, even coffee. 1 cup of mold-free organic coffee a day is a great source of antioxidants. Cacao nibs, one of the most nutrient-dense forms of food out there, and it's chocolate, raw chocolate. So there's a lot of ways to get these nutrients in. If you're deficient, we do like to supplement to catch you back up to where you should be so that you're fighting disease off appropriately. So like I said earlier, there are a couple of indicators that we can see that tell us about food additives in your diet. We can see parabens and some preservatives. We can even see aspartame if you're getting too much of that. So these are just some ingredients that, I would take a snapshot of this and just kind of take it with you, become familiar with it, because this stuff is in everything. Everything. And the reason being is it preserves food, so it has a longer shelf life, and you can sell it longer, so you make more money off of it. It really is as simple as that. So just be aware of these things. They are highly inflammatory. We do tests for a couple of them on the organic acid test, which I think is pretty cool, but if it's in your urine, that's bad. And if anything, I think that should motivate you to stop using those things. Like I said, we do look at aspartame, and I can speak from this one. I used to chew gum constantly that had aspartame in it, and I had a headache every single day, and I couldn't figure out why my head hurt so bad. But I quit aspartame gum, and within 3 days, my headaches completely went away. It took my body a little while to detox it all out of me, but I think it's pretty crazy what all aspartame can actually cause. And aspartame is actually something our body doesn't metabolize well, so it will build up in our system and stay there and crystallize and cause issues. So other things we look at are amino acids, and we can see how you're metabolizing your amino acids. So you could have a genetic disorder where you become short in enzymes, so you don't metabolize certain proteins well. Well, that would be really beneficial to know, especially if you can just have an enzyme used so that you start breaking down these things and using the protein that you're eating. Or, if it's a B vitamin issue, whatever it may be, the organic acid test helps us figure that out, and we use correlation with the patient's symptoms and the patient's lives in order to kind of piece together what's going on. So we do look at several amino acids and enzymes related to those. So this was a really brief overview of the organic acid test. And as mentioned before, you can find this on drjockers.com. There is a link to the site from this video if you look at, underneath the video from YouTube. And what you can do is just go to drjockers.com, go to the lab testing link, click on the organic acid test, and you can read more about it, and you can see what all we look at. But it really is a very informative test. It's the perfect starter test to just give us an idea. How are your neurotransmitters, your microbiome, your nutritional status, your antioxidants, all these things. So it gives us a good foundation where to start and continue digging to find what it is that you're struggling with. I love this slide. Apparently you have to eat healthy more than once to get in shape. This is cruel and unfair. Yes, this is so true. We do promote healthy lifestyles, healthy eating, and we want to help you stick to it. I think this is something that everybody struggles with, but once you find how to be healthy and you feel good, you don't want to go back. I promise you don't want to go back. Speaking from personal experience, like I said, I struggled with bulimia. I binged on sugar and carbs all day long. That was how I got through the day. And now I don't even crave that stuff, which is, I never thought I'd see the day where I didn't crave that stuff. So it's pretty incredible to see how far I've come on my journey. And I want that for you too, no matter what your struggle is. So this is a look at our food pyramid. This goes over the good fats, the antioxidants, grass-fed beef, wild-caught salmon. We limit nuts and seeds. They're pretty hard on the digestive system, so we do those in sauerkraut, things like that. And then we also use natural sweeteners, specifically stevia and monk fruit extract. Both of those are not going to affect your blood sugar levels, and they taste great. That's really brief about our food pyramid, but you can see it looks a little bit different than the food pyramid you're probably used to with the grains at the bottom. We do cut out grains. All right, well, thank you so much for joining me. Like I said, my name is Haley. I am a registered nurse and functional nutritionist. You can email me at nutrition@drjockers.com if you have any questions or would like to set up a consultation. We do work with clients all over the world. Thank you for joining me. It was great having you, and I hope you learned something today.